So you're doing carnivore, maybe keto, and you're following all the rules. But you've just hit a wall. You feel stuck. Well, if that's you, you're in the right place. Because in this explainer, we are going to get to the bottom of what's really going on. I mean, does this sound familiar? You are being so good. You're eating everything you're supposed to, but that scale, it just won't move. And what's worse, you're fighting these insane cravings, even for foods that are technically allowed. It is so frustrating, and let me just say, you are definitely not the only one going through this. And this brings us to something we can call the carnivore paradox. It's one of those things that just doesn't seem to make any sense on the surface, but once you get what's happening behind the scenes, it all starts to click. Right. You did the hard part. You cut out the sugar, you ditched the processed carbs, but now you can't stop thinking about cheese or bacon or those so-called keto-friendly treats. You've just swapped one obsession for another. That right there, that's the paradox we're about to unpack. Okay, this is where we have to totally flip the script on how we think about this problem. Because the issue isn't you. It's not about willpower, it's not some personal failure. What we're actually dealing with is a real biological condition. I really want you to let this quote from Dr. Joan Ifland, an expert in food addiction, just sink in for a second. Read it again. This is not your fault. Those cravings you're feeling, they're intense, they're real, and as we're going to see, they were put there on purpose. This isn't a flaw in your character, it's a feature of your biology being manipulated. So what is food addiction, really? It's all in the brain. The modern food industry has figured out how to create products that send your brain's reward centers into overdrive. And when that happens, those reward centers, well, they basically hijack the ship. They override the logical part of your brain, the part that wants to be healthy, and they start calling the shots. It's like your own mind is no longer your own. And get this, it's not an accident. Back in the 80s, when Big Tobacco started buying up huge food companies, they brought their playbook with them. And that playbook is all about addiction. They literally employ brain scientists to engineer foods that light up those reward centers as much as possible, just to make sure you can't stop coming back for more. All right, so if it's an addiction, what on earth is triggering it when you're on a clean carnivore diet? Let's go undercover and expose the foods that are secretly sabotaging you, even when you think you're doing everything right. So here are our main suspects. And you're going to notice these are staples for a lot of people on low-carb diets. We're talking about dairy. Yep, dairy. Then we've got those processed keto or carnivore-friendly treats. Way too much fat, and even too much salt. Let's dig into dairy first, because this one has a serious health halo that can be so misleading. We're told it's natural and healthy, but Dr. Ifland points out it's really a processed growth formula made to pack hundreds of pounds on a baby animal. And here's the kicker, it has something called casomorphins. Those are opioids that literally latch onto the same brain receptors as opium. And if that's not enough, studies show it can actually switch on genes for weight gain. In this quote, this just nails the issue with cheese. If you think of milk as having these mildly problematic compounds, well, cheese is the super concentrated version. It's like taking a mildly reactive plant and refining it into a powerful addictive drug. That's why it can be so hard to stop eating it. Now for the next big trap, what are called facsimile products. Think about it, your keto ice cream, your carnivore custard, your fat bombs. Here's the thing, your brain doesn't care if it's the healthy version. Just seeing, smelling, and tasting something that looks and feels like the junk food you used to eat triggers the exact same addictive pathways. It keeps the old addiction alive. Now, Dr. Ifland uses a really shocking analogy here to drive the point home, so brace yourself. She says, yeah, you could probably make meth at home that's safer than what you'd buy on the street, but where is this headed? The point isn't whether your homemade keto cookie is a tiny bit cleaner. The point is you're still practicing the addiction. Is that leading you to freedom or just digging you deeper into the same old trap? So how does this all spiral? It leads to this really important idea called the addiction transfer trap. This is what explains why, after you finally ditch the carbs, you suddenly find yourself craving something else with a crazy new intensity. So here's how it plays out, step by step. First, you stop eating carbs and you get what everyone calls the keto flu. But really, let's call it what it is. It's drug withdrawal. Then, phase 2. Because the addiction itself was never treated, it just transfers. It hops over to a new substance. Your brain starts screaming for high-fat foods. And then comes the final, dangerous phase. Those old sugar cravings, which were just hiding out, they come roaring back. And now you're not just fighting a sugar addiction or a fat addiction. You're fighting a combined sugar-fat super addiction. And as you can see here, the craving isn't just A plus B, it's exponential. It's a monster. This is why so many people feel completely and totally out of control. Okay, I know that sounds pretty intense, but truly understanding the trap is the very first step to getting out of it. So let's talk about the way forward. Let's talk about what a real solution actually looks like. And this is maybe the biggest takeaway of this whole explainer. The answer is not another diet. It's not a new list of good foods and bad foods. The real, lasting fix comes from shifting your focus away from the food and onto your brain. It's about finally recognizing and treating the addiction at its root. And just to give you some perspective on how real this is, let's look at the clinical definition. In addiction medicine, if you meet the criteria for just 6 symptoms, it's classified as a severe addiction. What blew Dr. Ifland's mind was finding that most people struggling with food easily clear that bar, but have no idea that what they're feeling is clinically severe. Let's look at a few of the most common signs. See if any of these hit home. Unintended use. That's when you have a plan, I'm not going to eat that, and then you eat it anyway. Cravings. Those thoughts about food that just won't leave you alone. Using despite consequences. That little voice that says, I know this is bad for me, but you do it anyway. And withdrawal. This is a big one. Eating not because you're hungry, but to make a headache or fatigue or a bad mood go away. Now, this quote points to a huge hidden reason for relapse that we almost never talk about, this social piece. See, our brains are wired with this incredibly deep, primal need to be normal, to fit in with our tribe. So when you start eating differently than everyone around you, your brain sees that as a threat to your survival, and it will fight you to the nail to make you conform. And that right there leads us to a really powerful solution. If the brain's need to be normal is what causes you to relapse, then the key is to change what normal means. You have to surround yourself with a community, a group of people where your new way of eating is the normal. When you do that, you harness that deep, powerful drive to work for you instead of against you. So we'll wrap up with this question for you to really think about. Take an honest look at your life, your home, your friends, the shows you watch. Is the world around you helping your brain heal, or is it constantly triggering you and feeding that cycle? Which path is your environment pushing you down? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.